All right, I have 7 o'clock. Would you please stand for the pledge of allegiance? I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. Thank you all in attendance and online. We're going to start out with any questions on attendance, Dave.
Oh, got it.
Then we'll move on to additions or corrections to the board agenda.
I had a few additions and corrections. First one is under resignations. We had a resignation come in today. The second corrections are both for Mrs. Richter and Ms. Saunders for their MOUs. Updated a line which we've done in the past for non-tenured teachers who are taking a 6th assignment class to give them a payday 1 day each quarter to do on the weekends for some paperwork, things like that. So I added that line into both of their MOUs. Number 6 for bills, we just didn't type in that it's an action item, so we added that. A little further down for the Indian education policy, updated that. It still had that our coordinator was the elementary counselor. That's not the case anymore. We have an American Indian education coordinator, so I just updated the title in that policy. And then the last one, the election resolution, we just updated. We now have 5 names who are running for the school board, so that is updated with those 5 names.
All right, does anybody have any questions regarding the agenda? If there are no questions, I am looking for an approval for the agenda.
I'll make a motion. I'll second.
There's a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Moving on to open forum. Rules for open forum. There are 3 minutes per speaker. Open forum shall not take more than a total of 15 minutes. No complaints about individual staff members. All presenters will conduct their business in a manner that meets community standards for decorum. The board will not take action on items presented in open forum. Did anybody sign up there?
No.
Does anybody wish to speak?
I'd like to speak, if that's all right. Can I just sit here? Do I need to?
You can do whatever you're comfortable with. Just please state your name.
I'm Vicki Painovich. And just in reference to, at the July meeting, we were talking about the player contribution for hockey and gathered a little bit more information on that. And I do have packets just kind of with that information if you guys wanted those to look at those in the meantime after I'm done. But I just put something together that just said I'd like to see the district per player contribution for hockey reevaluated and increased to a minimum of $15.05 because that's in line with basketball currently. For at least the past 17 years, that's as long as we've lived in the district contribution has remained at $1,000 for the boys co-op hockey fees, while like the coach's salary, ice fees, the refs, the workers' pay, those have all continued to increase over the last 17 years. By participating in these co-op sports, like wrestling, gymnastics, hockey, just to name a few of them, it keeps that Hinckley-Finlayson student athlete enrolled at Hinckley. And they get to play the sport that they're passionate about. So I just wanted to say, please consider increasing the hockey player contribution to that minimum of $15.05, so the boys hockey co-op fees are affordable for the student athlete families. So thank you.
Thank you, Vicki.
Did you guys want the information?
Right, did you, what we get emailed?
Is it different than
It
what
is the stuff that I had emailed to you.
they've seen it?
Okay.
All right, if it's not different, then we will move on. Thank you.
Yep.
Next up is the consent agenda. Does anyone need anything pulled from the consent agenda? If not, I am looking for a motion to approve the consent agenda.
I'll make the motion.
I'll second.
There's a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And I am abstaining. Next up is bills. If you have a question on the bills, please state the page number and the bill number. Does anybody have any questions on the bills? If there are no questions on the bills, I'm looking for a motion to pay the bills.
I'll move that.
I'll second.
There's a motion and a second, any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 7-0. Excuse me, next up is the superintendent's report. Mr. Masterson.
Thank you. I'll start with number 2. You all were invited to the back to school breakfast. We're doing a little different this year. It's historically been a back to school supper, dinner. This year we're trying a breakfast. We've had a lot of families, especially with cross country meet, having a meet that day, leaving and attending their child's event, which is good, but we want to try to get more staff there. We're inviting in support staff as especially with new laws, but also it's just good to get them training before the school year where they're coming in to get some of the 6 hours of mandatory training. So you're all invited as well. If you could let either Jill, Carlier, or I know if you plan on attending, just so we can plan enough food for everyone. We need to know that by next Friday, or this Friday. Next, I'd like to see if we can try to narrow down dates for new staff coffee. At least since I've been here, we've always done that historically in September with our new staff, bringing them in, just meeting board members. It's more of just an informal meet and greet. Last year's was very, very positive. We heard a lot of good things. So looking to see if the board wants to continue that and if we can possibly narrow down some dates so we can start planning that. Last year, the equivalent date to this year would be Wednesday, September 13th. We usually do it on Wednesdays after their early release staff development training. There's not as many sporting events, so is the board interested in doing that again? Would the 13th work? Would something different work?
I think it's a good idea.
I would like to continue doing it.
I
Would
would
it be better to do it a little later to give them a little more time under their belt than springing it on the second week? If we did it towards the end of the month more? I don't know.
Yeah,
Do you
maybe they
think
have a little.
it would be easier for new teachers to have?
I don't think their feet really stop moving.
Well, right, but I mean, just to give them,
Yeah, so
instead of that second week, like,
Yeah, maybe go third or fourth week,
Yeah.
have another week to.
20th or 27th?
Wednesdays are usually good for, so.
Wednesday, I know that the 20th, there's an ECMAC meeting, but we'd be done in time to get to that, so. Preference on dates?
I have no preference.
No preference.
Well, maybe the admin team and I can work that out and then we'll let you know, just double check, but we'll look at either the 20th or 27th of September to do that.
Okay.
You can see my proposed goals or my goals for this school year. Continue to improve staff climate, staff morale, support effective communication throughout the school district, utilize continuous improvement strategies and professional development and other collaborative efforts at all levels of the district to ensure high academic achievement as the district's priority, maintain productive relationships with all employee groups and departments, and then remain fiscally responsible with the school district's budget. Next item is the school district numbers. Again, these were 14 days ago or 13 days ago as of August 1st. I know they've changed for the better. We get enrollments daily at all buildings. Today there was one even for Finlayson. In this list, we haven't included all of our VPK numbers, and we have not included our Empower numbers as they do enrollments later in August. But happy to see, at least as of August 1st, Finlayson was higher than it was last year at this time, and I know we've grown in each of these buildings. So happy to see that. I'll have an updated report again as we get to September. But I know Jennifer Olander's gonna be pretty busy with enrollments. And then the last one I wanted to hit on, at least for the board education part, is levy. Feels like we talked about this quite a bit last year. The cycle has come back to the beginning where we will begin to get training, Joanne Bruns and I, on the new levy numbers and the new information from local property taxes. And then the process for the school board, you'll start to see information starting in September, and that will carry us all the way into December, where we'll set our truth in taxation for the taxes for the taxpayers. So just some more definitions, as you're going to hear these quite a bit from now through December. Not that we don't talk about it all school year, but the levy process is now restarted as we start to work to set our property taxes for next school year. Questions on anything that's in my report?
I do have a question, as far as the buses parking, or dropping kids off or picking kids up after school. Will the buses be parking along the sidewalk for pickups and drop-offs in the morning and after school?
Yes.
So there's no concern about streets being blocked going
The
forward?
streets will not be blocked. The city of Hinckley told us they would not like to see us continue, so Bonnie, Ms. Sculler, myself, and Sarah Beckridge are working on that, and the buses will be along the curb. We believe on the west side we can fit them all. We'll know for sure next week. We might have to move a couple around the corner,
Sure.
but they'll be all on the curb.
Sounds really good, thank you.
Any other questions? If not, we'll move on to, oh, thank you, Ryan. The high school principal.
Good evening. Would you like me to go through each handbook and vote independently, or do you want me to go through all of them and then vote at once at the end?
I think we'll vote at each,
Okay,
just so
sound good.
it's cut and dry.
All right, so first up is the substitute handbook. I did make a whole lot of changes in the substitute handbook, updated cost of lunches, some the cost of, or what they're getting paid. Also in there updating that we now have e-hall pass, so putting that in there, cell phones, and just, you know, updating a few little things. Any questions on the substitute handbook?
If not, I'm looking for a motion to approve the substitute handbook.
I'll make a motion.
I'll second.
There's a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion passes.
Next up is the faculty handbook. One thing I did was put a table of contents at the beginning, so that is a change. I went in and linked in policies right from the website, so you can just click on policies versus having things written in the handbook. Updated tardies and some other things that are part of I probably should have done the student handbook first, but some of the student handbook stuff will reflect in the faculty handbook. So most of the changes in here are in reflection to just some condensing things as well as changes that's going into the student handbook.
Does anybody have any questions regarding the faculty handbook?
One question on the link to the district policy 902. It goes to the old version of it, because we redid it within this last school year.
Okay, so
So it's just a matter of switching the link on.
sure.
on
Link
that one.
for, would you say policy?
902, it's on page 26.
Okay, I will fix that.
Thank you.
I can send that to you, St. tomorrow.
And then should it say bring guest in that instead of
I believe the policy's been guest for a visitor with, a staff member may bring a guest, not guests plural.
in that same
Okay,
use of school facilities? Just taking off the S.
Yep.
That's in parentheses.
Any other questions regarding the faculty handbook for Ms. Henke? If not, I'm looking for a motion to approve it.
I'll move that one.
I'll second.
There's a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes.
all right, moving on to the student handbook. Again, added a table of contents to the beginning, changed the logo on the front from a generic picture to our Jaguar. Added in on page 3 the Wednesday schedule, linked in the school board policy 504 under dress codes. One thing for study halls is just having cell phones allowed for 9th through 12th graders in study halls and not for 7th and 8th graders. So that's one change that I would like to make for next year as far as cell phones during study halls. Also to the cell phone policy, linking in the verbiage from the state's recommendations. So I added in that language around the cell phone policy. Again, that's directly related to the district policy. Tardies is something that we're looking at doing something different this year. Instead of having teachers go in and put tardies, and then Bridget would go at the end of the day, look at tardies, keep track on a spreadsheet. After 3 tardies, she'd have to fill out a referral, then would have to come to us. And sometimes it would take a couple days before kids would get down to see us to talk about tardies. And so looking for next year, having tardies be more on the spot. And so teachers will be allowed to give detentions after 2 tardies in their classroom and have it be more at the local level within the classroom so students get immediate feedback. Because a lot of times we'd get students that would come into the office and be like, well, I wasn't tardy. Well, the teacher marked you tardy, but they didn't know they were marked tardy. And then I'd have to talk to the teacher to verify that they really were tardy. And so this way it's more students know in the moment they're tardy. And then once, if there's a problem, it becomes more than a few tardies within a class period, then it comes to Mandy and myself meeting with students, talking about what's happening. And so it just kind of takes away some of that first few tardies. It can be handled right in the classroom where teachers put them in lunch detention. So changing that policy around tardies is the reason why and what I'm looking at doing to try and free up some time and make things more efficient. I also moved the behavior consequence matrix to the end of the handbook. Detention, I added cell phones needed to be turned in for detention. LinkedIn, again, school board policies. With computers, just spelling out what happens with lost or missing mobile devices on page 10. I took out just the discipline for mobile devices and put that in the matrix at the end. One big change for the academics is looking at new legislation. Arts credits can only be given for like Woods and some of those types of electives if that teacher is teaching the arts standards within that content area. They have to be CTE certified. They have to also take the tests for art to be able to be certified to do that. And so talking with Ashley, we're removing her classes as giving arts credit. So students have to, starting next year, we'll have to have one of either arts, band, music, media arts as to earn their arts credit based on the state requirement for graduation. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. So that's that change there. Electives for flexing, looking at just having it be for 11th and 12th grade. One thing, we have a lot of kids coming in and out, and I just feel like it's better if we just keep it for 11th and 12th grade and not for 10th graders, keeping them in the building. So that's one change for the flexing policy. And again, just updating some dates on there. Trying to think if there's anything else there. Again, I linked in policies, the new policies, and then going to the behavior matrix. Again, just kind of took out the PE non-dress because we don't require students to dress for PE, so there's no need for a consequence there. Just kind of tweaking some things. For technology, trying to think of for skipping class and leaving the building without permission, I've added in with the 4th violation that we will have a meeting with parents and they will have loss of hallway privileges. So instead of students being able to just, take a pass and go, that they're either with our behavior interventionalists will be monitoring to make sure that they go to where they need to go so that they're not leaving the building or skipping or things like that. So I've added that under attendance. I also rearranged the behavior matrix into like sections. So it's like all the technologies in one place, all of the bullying is one place, because sometimes it's hard when you have a student with a referral trying to figure out when you're flipping from page to page. So having all in one section, you can kind of look at where the violation sits along that continuum of what happened. I'm trying to think of what else. Bullying and harassment, I've added in racial slurs. That was an issue last year with students using racial slurs. So I wanted to spell that out specifically where that fits in the handbook and what the consequences are for doing that. I think that's the big things. I know that's a lot. So, what questions do you have?
I do have a question. Go ahead.
Okay, do we still do the activity bus if we have 35 students for away games?
I don't.
If they come in, you mean the activity bus after practice?
No, or spectator bus, I guess I should call it.
For like going to state tournaments, things like that?
Yeah.
We haven't offered it for a while. We could certainly consider that if we
Okay,
made the
because
state
it is
tournament.
in there.
Yeah.
Okay, 35, okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I do have a question about one of the new policy changes on page 3, dress code. It looks like you removed headwear. Previously it was all students will remove headwear, backpacks and sunglasses, but you removed headwear. Is one of those things to remove?
Yes, because we allow students to wear hats.
Is that something new for this year?
No, that was new last year.
It was new last year?
Yep.
So last year, what could they wear that's different from this coming year?
Nothing.
It's just the same?
Yeah, I just removed it because they can now wear hats. So that was probably just something that didn't get taken out last year.
Okay, so there's no real change from headgear from last year to this upcoming year?
Correct,
It was just we had to update our policy book, is that right?
Just in here, that they don't have to remove their hats when they come into the building.
Okay. Is there any concern about kids wearing earbuds during class with hoodies or hats pulled over their ears?
Yes.
So how do we enforce that?
Well, in the new policy, once it's approved, I believe that's next month, Brian, right? The dress code.
Dress code is next month.
Yeah, so if the board approves that next month, they lay out kind of in there how they want that to be handled. So if you guys approve that next month, then we will enforce it that way.
Okay. I have yet to speak to any teacher or community member that is in favor of students wearing hoodies or hats covering their ears.
Yeah, and
So,
in the policy, it says if they're wearing hoods, they have to be visible so that teachers can see if there's headphones in their ears.
I just think that opens up a whole can of worms by allowing that. It should be zero tolerance, in my opinion. And I'd
For
be curious to
hoods?
know what other school board members think about that.
We probably added hoods. We allowed them to wear hoods before we allowed them to wear hats, which was probably 3 years ago now, I want to think. I think we added hats last year, so maybe the year before we added hoods. The reason at the time is it just was something we were chasing all the time and getting after kids for hoods when it really wasn't a learning disruption. Earbuds have grown and it's more common, especially non-wireless, but at the time it was, why are we fighting hoods when we should be worrying, when it wasn't getting in the way of their education. So that's why we allowed it, and then last year we allowed hats.
And if I remember correctly too, one of the counselors was here and explained to us about hoods, how it's like a trauma response. And so the board took that into consideration when we did vote.
And I see there's another statement regarding that. It says, and this is also removed from our student handbook going forward, is students with medical or religious reasons for wearing headgear can see the principal for accommodations, which I think is reasonable. So Jody, in your circumstance there with a student who might have a medical reason, I think that would be just fine. But I think there should be a note from a doctor, just my opinion. I was looking at the faculty handbook. It says attire for faculty. Faculty and staff are asked to dress to set an atmosphere of professionalism, no caps. So by allowing students to wear hoodies and caps, are we teaching our students how to behave unprofessionally? I think we should be encouraging professionalism from all parts of the classroom. And I can speak from my experience going to Hinckley High School. There was nobody wearing hats or hoodies, and I know times have changed. But even at my place of employment, when we have classroom time, nobody's wearing hats. In fact, we have to wear business casual. We cannot wear jeans or t-shirts or tennis shoes, no hats. And the instructor's wearing a tie. So, and I think if we raise the bar, I think we might have better behavior from our students.
But then though too, Toby, so if they show up to school, they're not dressed appropriately, do we send those kids home?
I'm not talking about dressing business casual for our students. I'm just simply saying, let's not have hats or hoodies. And I think that's pretty easy to accommodate or accomplish. I mean,
And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, did 1 year two, we did the hats just on Fridays only as a trial run?
Yep.
And the kids were respectful, isn't that why then we changed it to?
In my experience, that the hats also became very similar to the hoods, where we were chasing them down all the time when there were bigger things that, that was something that the dean of students and myself at the time, we were fighting all the time, every day, every hour, when there were bigger, more important, in my opinion, things to deal with than hats and hoods. The board could certainly decide to change that if they want, but going to past practice, it's going to be a lot of chasing down for the principal and dean of students, in my opinion, over something that maybe isn't getting in the way of their education. I understand the respect and dress code, but it's not really getting in the way of their learning, what was part of the rationale for making the change a few years ago.
I think you open up a big can of worms when hoodies are allowed, and teachers are just gonna get tired of enforcing, I can't see your ears. They're gonna get tired of that. Whereas if you just have a blanket rule, no hoodies, no hats covering your ears, then the teacher doesn't have to get exhausted about, can I see your ears? Can I see it? Make sure you don't have anything earbud in. Otherwise, I disagree with you. I feel it will affect their learning and education if we have to battle earbuds being hidden.
I know when I was a dean under Mr. Masterson, it was a battle every day to have a kid. They could be sitting in class with a hat on and participating fine, but you asked to take that hat off and it was a battle. So Shelley, you're right. Go home, you don't need to be here today because you won't take your hat off. I totally understand where you're coming from because I'm old school as well. It is a battle, and that there's not a consequence that kids really care about as far as take your hat off, you're gonna go home. Because what do you do, like take them out of class? It's a battle. It's a battle with the kids every day.
Well, I don't think it should ever come down to a battle like that where the kid says, fine, I'll go home. I think at that point, there needs to be some further meeting with the parents and the student at that point, in my opinion, because I don't think the students should run the school classroom. It should be the Board of Education sets the tone, the administrators enforce what the school board wants, and the students don't run the school. Because I think what you described there, the students are kind of running the school, and I don't agree with that. And I bet there might be a board member who agrees with me.
Did we have any issues last year with kids in earbuds with their hoods up? Because they've been allowed 2 years now to wear hoods.
I can maybe think of 5 to 10 incidents where I had to deal with earbuds. It was not even close to the top of my radar as far as issues. We did have a few students on IEPs that needed that accommodation.
Mm-hmm.
That was more of what we worked on, and those students would have those accommodations to be able to listen to music to help meet their goals. But as far as gen ed stuff, it was not a big problem at all.
I'd be curious to have a poll and know what the teachers think about the hat thing.
And that's
you get a range of opinions. You have people that don't like it and find it disrespectful. You have, I don't know, I guess the flip side of that is kind of seeing the forest from the trees with the kids, where, if I'm trying to teach a kid, does it do me any good to get caught up on what's on their head? If I'm trying to reach the whole student, that's not the battle that I'm going to worry about. I would say it's probably fairly split in the staff. It gets kind of annoying when you look across the class and you realize that there was that one kid that had their earbuds in for 20 minutes and you were trying to lecture, but I don't know. So it's like Bonnie said, going back a handful of years, I got tired of fighting that battle. If the policy changed, I'd have to find the energy to fight that battle again. But I don't know. Does that give you some thoughts on that?
My only question would be, we've had hoods for 2 years and hats for a year, and I don't think I have received one email or phone call from a teacher or staff member saying they didn't appreciate the change or concerns with the change. And I think if there was that many staff members that were concerned, we would have heard about it.
I've heard from a former teacher, long-time teacher, and I'm also aware that, you know, it can cause let's say it shortchanges those students who wear the earbuds because they're listening to music. And
I'm not talking about the earbuds, I'm just talking about headwear or hats. I don't think they should be wearing earbuds.
the thing is, if you allow headwear, that can go beyond just like baseball cap. That can go to things that cover your ears. And what the previous policy was, each teacher can decide if they want hats or not in their classroom, is that right? And now it's just gonna be a blanket, hats in all classrooms are allowed?
Hoods, initially, that was the policy, that it was kind of by teacher discretion. Hats were always banned prior to 2 years ago, just on Fridays last year, every day. Hoods, I don't remember how many years ago, initially it was teacher discretion. Then it was like, let's just be united on this, and when we decided to stay with the hoods. And then, like I said, last year, we let the hats every day, all the time.
I originally was 100% against hoodies and hats. I realized that the administration shouldn't be spending 3/4 of their day worrying about hats. I'd rather have them learning, so I did switch my opinion. And I was fairly strong against it at first, but.
I'd have to say I was the same with Leo. Times change. I mean, I guess if I think it's a parent thing. If they want their child to not wear a hat, that's between the student and them. I think the administration, I think the teachers have bigger fish to fry than someone wearing a hat. Make a big deal out of it, do their homework instead, you know.
So last year, could some teachers decide that I don't want hats in my classroom? Is that a scenario where a teacher could decide that?
Our policy last year was to allow it,
All hats, all classes,
unless the hats had some saying on it that was inappropriate.
and that's been enforced for 2 years.
Last year, every day, the year before, just on Fridays or maybe Mondays too. Fridays and Mondays, I think we let them the year before.
Because I think if you open up Pandora's box for Fridays, now you've got kids bringing them in every day. I don't know, go ahead.
Well, they were anyway, sorry to cut you off, Angela. I mean, kids were bringing hats even when the policy was 0. I mean, almost every teacher in the high school probably fought it almost every day. Kids didn't leave it in their lockers. And then it just became an issue where, am I gonna kick the kid out of, say, art class when it wasn't more of a disruption than a hat? You know, they're losing their learning over something that seemed, you know, they had no other violation. I understand it was a violation, but why take away learning for a hat? And I guess that was at the time as principal, I didn't want to fight that. I'd rather them stay in art class than fight over a hat.
Were there ever any instances where the administration would say to the student, let's talk this over with your parents, let's talk about why you're wearing a hat and you refuse to take it off?
Yes.
Did those conversations take place?
Yes, and we'd take the hats away and another hat would come back from the same kid the next day, and parents would agree, but you know, the kid would still show up with a different hat the next day, even if we took it, or it just.
So no consequences then?
Oh yeah, consequences would go up every time they'd lose the hat, and the consequences would build from lunch detention to suspension, and it just felt like, why am I suspending a kid over a hat?
It just seems some of these exit interviews paint a picture of classrooms where there's a lot of disruptions. And I don't like that, to hear that as a school board member.
Well, I think the hat's not a disruption. I think taking it away from them is a disruption.
Well, not just for that student, but for all the other students that are there trying to learn, because now the teacher has to spend time dealing with the student with a hat.
I see where you're coming from, Toby, but I have to think at some point we have to care more about the student and them getting the education rather than what they're wearing on their head. And if we're having to like ask them to like leave the class because they won't take off their hat or their hood, then they're losing like good teaching time, and then it does disrupt the class. But I do see where you're coming from.
Sure.
But then I also see it from the administration side of, yeah, we have a dean and a principal, and is that really what we want them to have to focus all of their time on?
I feel like the teachers have to be in control, not the students, and I feel like the students are in control. Not the good students, the troublesome students who like to cause disruptions. I feel like they're running the classrooms.
But I think in response to that, I don't think it's just bad students that wear hats.
I'm not saying that that's just
Okay.
students who wear hats. I mean, a student can disrupt the class without wearing a hat as well.
Yeah.
So,
The link for policy 504 isn't in here. Do you have when it was, when we approved it? Like how long this has been?
I think I can look it up here. It's 50, I think we changed it to 506 as well. So we're doing student discipline policy again tonight for approval. The student appearance is a new policy that's coming up. The state hasn't had a student appearance policy before. We have it for our first read next month. They had some general rules, they didn't have a formal policy on it. Basically the rules were it shouldn't have inappropriate sayings or symbols, things like that, or be offensive.
So it wasn't a policy, it was just in the handbook
Correct.
that
It
we
was
approved
just
each year. So
just
last year we approved they're able to wear it.
Correct.
Got it. Thank you.
This board approved it.
I do have one other concern too with the student handbook, talking about Wednesday early release days. Brian, did you say that we have 37 early release days coming up approximately?
If I counted correctly, yes.
So if it's a 7-hour school day or so, that means there's 5 days of lost learning, which is a week of school we lose for each student, just to get off 1 hour early every Wednesday. I feel that should be changed to previous, to where it's a full day Monday through Friday, because as we've learned, our test scores are down, especially post-COVID, and I don't see a reason for stealing a week of education for our students K through 12 to get out 1 hour early on Wednesday.
This school board set the calendar in March, which had the early release days. It's also for the professional development for the staff, which is important to help continue their growth and learning so they can deliver better education for the kids. I wouldn't advise changing our calendar now with 3 weeks before school starts. That is certainly something we could look at if the board wishes, when we get to the calendar setting for next year, but that was set when we set our calendar back probably in February or March.
I think our calendar could stay the same, we're just changing the clock. It ends at 3:10, or the same as it does the other days of the week. We're not changing the calendar, just the clock on one day, by 1 hour.
We'd be missing out that hour of professional development every week for our staff.
I think there could probably be another time that could be figured out, so we don't, not at the expense of 1 week of learning for our students. I think it's important for our teachers to, professional development, but not at the cost of a week of education for our students, K through 12.
But with those early release days, we're still getting the state recommended number of learning days for our students.
We are over the state recommended days over the minimum number of state recommended days for our
And
students.
hours.
Yeah, we are over by about, I believe it's 4 days.
But our test scores are not where they need to be. That's a problem. And I'm not sure why the kids need to go home an hour early. It's just an hour, but it adds up at the end of the year. It adds up. It's a week of school.
All right, do we have any more questions regarding the student handbook changes? If not, I am looking for a motion to approve the changes to the student handbook.
I'll second
Any other discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Motion passes 6-1. Next up is the ELC or Empower Learning.
So there's quite a few changes in here. Val, with her taking over the program, did some changes, and it's a lot of just word, I'm sure when you look through it, a lot of wording changes, just kind of making it her own. A few things just to kind of draw your attention to. One thing, while on page, let me find it here. On page, oh, she doesn't have page numbers, I apologize. So closed campus flexing, while they do not have flexing like the high school, so juniors and seniors at the high school can flex classes, what she's proposing is to have flex passes. So giving twice a month, students can have a flex pass if they're on track academically for credits. They have no unexcused absences, have fewer than 3 tardies, and no behavior or substance violations. They can earn 2 flex passes that would allow them to go get lunch or run to Daggett's to grab something, kind of like the juniors and seniors can flex at the high school. So that's one kind of thing that she put in there. And again, a lot of it is just some just minor tweaks to some verbiage and things like that. Are there any specific questions you have about Empower?
I guess not. If there are no questions, then we need a motion to approve the Empower handbook.
Joe, you have a question?
Yeah.
On the previous vote, do we need to do a roll call on that?
Because there was only one
I know we've done a roll call every time there's been
on
one.
the 6th one. We certainly can.
For the record,
It still will be recorded that Hickle was nay.
sure. That's fine.
So let's do a roll call for the student handbook changes. Leo,
I was yes.
Toby,
No,
Angela,
Yes.
Heather,
Yes.
Shelley,
Yes,
Dave,
Yes.
Jody, yes. So now I'm looking for a motion to approve the Empower Learning Handbook.
I'll make the motion.
I'll second.
Is there any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 7-0.
Thank you. Kind of moving on to the rest of my agenda. I attached in our workshop week agenda. Really excited to have my second year starting this year and jumping in. Bonnie and I worked a lot to kind of streamline some things going forward. Really excited to kind of have, we're going to start off with doing all of our district stuff on the first day and get a lot of our trainings in, and then kind of allow teachers to have some flexibility to do planning as we go through the week. So that's that. Hiring update, still looking for an English teacher. We are able to, with the MOUs you approved, make it work without having to hire a non-licensed English teacher. We can make it work with the 3 English teachers we have. So if we are not able to find an English teacher, we are still going to be fine and be able to offer the classes with licensed English teachers. So that's great news. We're still also looking for an Empower teacher as well at this point. And then also a couple paras, one in transition and one in our DCD program. So that's my hiring update. Principal goals for this school year, very similar to what I had last year. Again, creating a safe and positive learning environment by proactively supporting student behavior, ensuring all handbooks are followed with consistency and used to inform decisions. Really gonna work on getting into classrooms more to be involved with what's happening and be more proactive. Also supporting the mentorship and coaching of staff members to be successful with student outcomes and their professional goals, and then reinforcing our focus on students and staff being known, valued, and challenged to succeed. I want to get into classrooms a lot more, engage with students in their learning, and invest more in partnerships in the community and just being more active and meeting more people this year as well. Those are some dates for August for me. And then the best part is introducing our new school board members for this school year. I had 3 people that said they'd like to be a part, and I couldn't choose between the 3. So I asked Brian if we could do 3. And so the 3 members are Brecken Hansen, Hannah Hartle, who's not here tonight because she's working, and Matthew Masterson. So I'd like to welcome them and invite them to just share what they're excited about for the upcoming school year.
I'm Brecken, and I'm looking forward to my senior season and then just like making memories with my friends.
I'm Matt, and I'm looking forward to cross country and trying to do well in school without my brother tutoring me.
Does the board have any questions for them?
Does anybody have any questions?
I do have a question for Ms. Hinckley. How many students did sign up for the year-long class that includes doing a science project in grades 10, 11, and 12 since the change was made to the science curriculum?
Sorry, my computer's slow, of course, when I need it. I believe we had 10 that are signed up for the science fair elective, but I'll verify that.
Okay.
All right, we're gonna move on, but we are happy to have you guys, Brecken, Matthew. We wanna hear all about it, okay? If no other questions for Ms. Henke, I think we're gonna keep moving on here. Next up is Mrs. Scully.
Good evening. In my report, you can see the workshop schedule is linked in there. That is HES's. The only difference on FES is they have a different staff meeting time. I too am interested to see how this first day district-wide training will go. We have some good PD coming in. One of our days is fully used up with open house. We have scheduled open houses, so it is a little bit more of a pinch of time for my teachers, but they seem to adapt to that pretty well. This was a week ago, so this has changed. We had 8 teachers hired. We have 7 now. We still have a dean and we still have a junior high counselor. We're still currently looking for a 5th grade math and early childhood special education teachers. We do have things in place to fill both of those positions if needed. At this time, we were looking at still hiring 9 paraprofessionals. We were down to 7, and then this afternoon, possibly 1 more, so hopefully down to 6. So we're moving in the right direction. Couple of my goals year 2 of Amplify. We have 5 new gen ed teachers that will be teaching Amplify, so getting them onboarded. With our school improvement plan, we're going to be looking at student perceptions on how they feel about reading, and as well as teachers to see how comfortable they are and what PD that they need around them to make them feel more confident and skilled in their Amplify delivery. So we worked with the BLT team. Now this is our 2nd time this summer that we met with them, and really just hearing what they need to support them. We have a majority of our teachers implementing Number Corner, which is part of the Bridges curriculum, and then hopefully full on Bridges next year. Ms. Hankey talked about our improvement on teacher evaluations, so providing more meaningful feedback to them. And one thing that's really on my radar, and we talked about it at BLT today too, was family engagement and getting families back into the school. So we threw around a variety of ideas, looking at bringing back more all-school celebrations with being inclusive to all kids. So just being cautious on how we go about that. But so my goals this year, and also strong communication with everyone. Talked about early release days and some of that PD that Mr. Masterson talked about, what that will look like at the elementary. We'll have the kindness wall again. Again, number 5 is a week and a half old, so those numbers have changed, but again, we're getting numbers in, so you can kind of see what that layout looked like per grade level in classroom. My number 6 is my handbook, so we can go through that. We will, Jody, you want to do those individually as well?
I think it would be a good idea.
Okay. So if we look at our staff handbook, is the first one. Really, the majority of it is just staff names have changed, and we'll have to go in and fill some more in as of last week. We made sure we're going to do a lot more behavior data collection. So one of the things that happens, I send Ms. Hankey out, I do the referral, but oftentimes teachers don't have the time to stop and do the referral right away. So either they're doing it on their prep or when they go home and they're relaxing. So it all came in at one time. So making sure that we collect the accurate time of that incident so we can be looking for trends and stuff as we go through that behavior data. So just make sure that is in there. Reflection of times, we're gonna open up a little bit earlier so we can get our day started at 8:20. Transportation, we wanna make sure that the teachers we're communicating both ways to the office and from the teachers, that if there's the transportation change for a student, that's not getting missed. So kids are where they're supposed to be. So we wanna make sure we're emphasizing that. You'll see under bathrooms, making sure teachers are doing checks at the bathroom after they use the facilities. Make sure we're keeping some accountability there. Not a whole lot of changes. You'll see release time, we are going back to Wednesdays for release time versus Thursday. Mr. Masterson and I met with the local churches and had a very good conversation. They were very appreciative of our flexibility and we were of theirs. So that will be going back to Wednesdays. Just shared up our special ed referral process. That is the process we currently use, so just made sure that's in writing there. We put there's a new user use form, internet use form, so that will be linked in there, that they have to sign off that they're using our internet and devices appropriately. We also added the drug-free workplace and drug-free school in there with that policy due to the fact that cannabis is now legal. Other than that, really nothing has changed in that policy. Questions on that?
Just a comment that I think it's great that church release got moved to Wednesday, so the kids are in class more often, so.
Thank you. Yes, that was our concern as well.
Good, thank you.
Any questions for Mrs. Scollard regarding the staff handbook changes? If not, I am looking for a motion to approve it.
I'll make a motion.
I'll second.
There's a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes.
Thank you. Moving on to the student parent handbook. Really our big changes, again, there's some times, some staffing. We're going to try and be, I don't know, we've been working on attendance forever, but we put it in there that they're limited to 7 days of vacation time without, beyond that, they would need to have a conversation with me just to kind of keep them in school. We went with 15 days versus the 13. Prior to that, it was 13 days you could be excused being sick, but then you'd need a doctor's note, and so we're just trying to work with families on that. So we moved that to 15. Changed the cost of second lunch to $5 if a kid needed a second lunch. So we changed that verbiage. The times on hot breakfast. The big change in our handbook is going to be the use of restorative justice, as we have new legislation saying we can't suspend unless the other ideas have been exhausted. So just kind of goes through and lists what we're gonna do on first, second, third offenses. I look to have many more parent meetings on maybe the third offense. We're going to get a team meeting together and sit down at the table and see if we can problem solve. Sometimes that works, sometimes it doesn't. So you can kind of read through what those restorative justice processes look like. Big proponent of restorative justice. I think it really teaches kids a lesson to see if they can fix or repair relationships that were damaged. Added in the tobacco-free environment, making sure that kids are very well aware that electronic devices, including vaping, are not allowed at school. am working with the county to see if the evening reporting center will take, how low they'll go on their age bracket. So I was talking to Sherry today in regards to that, and we're just not sure yet. So that could be a possibility, and I'll bring that back to the board if that becomes of anything, if we can work with the county. Other than that, immunizations still kind of be a thorn in the side of our nurses, so we're gonna have clear and concise communication and expectations for our parents in regards to immunizations or getting exempt from them. It's really all we have in regards to these changes. Any questions?
If there are no questions regarding the student parent handbook, I'm looking for a motion to approve it.
I'll move that.
I'll second.
There's a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Can I just say something?
Yeah.
Has there been any thought about going to a grading system other than the standards-based system? I mean, exceeding standards, I mean, what's the definition of exceeding standards
Yeah,
versus?
I mean, we've had a lot of discussion in regards to that. Exceeding standards, so it's like the difference between an A and a C, right? So maybe little Fred is really good with multiplication, division, and subtraction, but he struggles with adding. So where do we put him at a B? This more just gives us an opportunity to look at the very precise standards that our power standards that we're focusing on. It's messy. We've had discussion in regards to going back to A, B, C, D, but we fall under the same, there's gonna be some standards that are missing.
Sure. I just feel like the A, B, C, D kind of gives parents just a little bit more clarity as to where their student is at versus meeting standards like an S.
Yeah, I think with an S, at least it narrows it down versus math, you have a B. Standards based, you're partially meeting here, but you're meeting standards here, you know, so it gives you an idea of at least where they need to focus a little more of their work versus just math. So I think that's the reason we stay with that. We are going to look at see over the next couple of years if our power standards are aligned with where they need to be, what we're teaching.
How do the neighboring school districts grade their elementary students?
I honestly don't know that.
Okay.
I could find that out, but I don't know. John, have you heard anything about neighboring school districts?
Most of them grade standards based all the way up into junior high.
East Central and Pine City do that.
I think Pine does, I'm not sure, I think East Central for sure is through 6th grade, they may do junior high. But Pine City was, when I talked to Nicole Latham last, I thought they were standards based.
Okay.
I know going north, a lot of those schools are, I think Moose Lake is for sure through 6th grade, and Little River, Cloquet's all the way through 8. Some of the Duluth schools are going standards based, and some of the high schools are starting to go standards based. Just depends on where you're. Actually, in Okehennepin, where I was last, the whole school district was standards based, K through 12.
Are there any that are not standards based that you're aware of?
I'm sure there are, not that I've been at lately. I think the push is there because I think there's also some colleges that have started doing standards based. It's just, there's just a difference, like, you have an A, right, and standards based allows for students to, like, show continuous improvement over time, so that's, they may be at a certain point then and there. Like, your kid may get an A on chapter 2, or let's just talk math for a second. And when we were taught math, if you got an A, it meant you knew that content at that time, but it doesn't mean that you know it in the 3rd quarter or the 4th quarter. You might have forgot it. I can tell you for myself, for social studies, if I would have been standards based and they would have followed my understanding of what I knew from quarter 1 to quarter 4, I would have been meeting standard in quarter 1 on whatever we studied in quarter 1, but in quarter 4 I would not have been meeting the standard. Because I crammed traditional grammar, crammed for the test, got the grade, moved on. With standards based, you can kind of follow kids and but learning over a projection of time rather than a one snapshot in time.
So on a report card that parents receive with standards-based, the math is broken down.
Yeah, you have power
Various
standards identified
categories.
on, yep,
So like, when Bonnie says power standards, they'll try to pick the 8 to 10 power standards that are, that they want those students to leave 4th grade knowing. And then how those students are doing over time with those standards. So they might not hit all of them in quarter 1, which is fine. But the ones they do in quarter 1, the projection would be that they continue to come back to those a little bit and build more on that standard as the student moves along through their school year.
Could they use letter grades, traditional letter grades for each of those standards?
In
No.
schools that, like in the high schools, they still use a letter grade because they haven't figured out how to do GPAs with the standard space yet. So they take an average of their power standards, so if there's 8 or 9 standards, they'll average them out and then they'll have a certain criteria for this number could potentially be an A and this would be a B, but they only do it for letter grades.
but most elementary, it's.
I have not seen
they're
an elementary
meeting
that does that, no.
letter grades.
No, that'd be more of a, like I said, a high school thing, and some of the junior highs that still wanna, if they have to report, it's really more for the reporting in junior high, that's the only reason. And then high school, it's a GPA thing.
Cause the report cards, I don't know if anybody's seen them recently, but the elementary, it doesn't just say math.
Right.
Like, there's different criteria they have to meet.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe send out a report card for an elementary to the board. I don't know if everybody's seen a recent one.
I have, but I don't understand, there's something.
I mean, just so they can see what the standards base means. It's not the traditional, like,
No,
some of us when we went to school, it was
Right.
math and reading and
Right.
ABC, or you got an
we
S or
try to
S
really
plus.
focus on the standards that we're focusing on.
But instead of, on the lifting of standards for math, instead of saying S, why not say B or A or C for each of those line items? It's like,
No, cause
where's my student at?
your partially is your B, your meeting is your, right, so your meeting standards, ESPN, are you exceeding?
C is,
It's-
would C be meeting standards? 70%,
Like partially, would be a P,
okay.
yeah. And teachers really work with parents in understanding that at conferences
For
or,
sure.
or if they have questions, you know, it's a little bit messy, but trying to give the parents the most information we can based on the standards that we're teaching them.
Right.
I don't know if there's a perfect answer, Toby, but I think since we switched this probably 10 years ago, it's been pretty well received with our parents. We had a 6th to 7th meeting, to see if they've heard any complaints from 7th grade parents, and they hadn't, so, because we were concerned about that transition, going back to standards or general grading, and there wasn't, our parents are doing pretty well with it, so.
Sure,
We appreciate you bringing up that question though.
yes.
Okay, so I do believe there's a motion and a second. Dave?
Mhm.
Yep. All right, so all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
I'm opposed. I'd like to see the grading change.
So we're gonna do roll call. Leo,
I'm yes.
Toby,
No.
Angela.
Yes.
Heather,
Yes.
Dave,
Yes.
Shelley,
Yes,
Jody, yes. Next up, Bonnie?
Sub handbook, really the only thing that changed in here is clarifying the procedure of when a kid gets sent out of class or if there's an emergency. Other than that, release time back to Wednesday and the staffing update. Questions on that?
If there are no questions on the AGS substitute handbook, I'm looking for a motion.
I'll make a motion.
One second.
There's a motion and a second, any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes.
FES, same exact thing, staffing updates, and that was the only change there. Questions?
If there are no questions, I am looking for a motion to approve the FES substitute handbook.
I'll make the motion.
I'll second.
There's a motion and a second, any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Alright, thank you, and moving on to the rest of my report, reading corps, we will have reading corps back in the building. This is the third year and it's been very, very well received. We have seen, very good results out of our kids who are working with our reading corps. They work with the kids who are right on that bubble of meeting grade level expectations, so, as far as fluency. So we have 3 of the 4 positions hired right now. They'll continue to search for that 4th one. We have 1 math corps who works with K3, and then when we have 1 pre-K position who works with our youngest learners. So we are excited to have them back in the building. With the addition of the 1st grade classroom, we will have 2 teachers that have to share a room, so that was some shifting that we went through late July, early August. Judy Nelson was shifted in her title position as well to a new room, as well as speech was moved to a new location for the 3rd time, I think. Everybody's settling into their new positions. Number 9 is a late addition for me, as we kind of firmed up today what we will do if we don't get a 5th grade teacher. Mr. Barkey will be back in 6th grade science. Mr. Greenwald will move back to 5th grade science. Mr. Whalen will go back to 5th grade math. What this does mean, and it's a bummer for our kids, is we will not have STEM as part of the specials rotation this year. And a lot of kids love that, but needing to fill those other positions first is kind of the way we're gonna go. We had 3 teachers who were more than willing and flexible. So I really appreciate those 3 teachers making some changes to meet our kids' needs, so. That is all I have.
Are we gonna keep that position open so there would be a change if we did hire mid-year, or have you not thought of that? Or?
We did have a little bit of that conversation today. I think a mid-year, if I did anything, I think I would put them in 6th grade science for the rest of the year, move Barkey back to STEM, and then at the end of the year, move them to 5th grade math.
Okay.
So I just had that conversation with whoever I interview, saying you'd finish out the year in 6th grade science and then shift next year.
Okay. So then the other students would get STEM?
Yep, then we'd have
Mr.
STEM
Barkey.
back, yep.
Okay. Does anybody have any questions for Mrs. Sculler? Thank you.
Thank you.
Next up is Jonathan, curriculum and testing report.
Good evening. Most of the curriculum's in. We have a few things that are straggling in here. Teachers are already grabbing it from me before I can even get it off the shelf, so that's good to see. We've had a lot of different PD this summer. We've had all of our math teachers, our last one's going through right now, but that are teaching a new curriculum. I've gone through in-person training, except for one will be doing a virtual, but lots of good reviews from them on that. Mrs. Sculler, Ms. Hankey, and myself were able to go to a site-based leadership to better support our math teachers for this upcoming year. We did 3 days down in Minneapolis and had a good time. We got to learn a little bit about CPM and make some connections with people around the United States, actually. We have lots of PD coming up. It was highlighted a little bit by each of the other reports that we heard already. So starting with the first day back to school for teachers, and then we have some PD lined up for continued PD for Amplify for ELA that we purchased last year. So for all of our teachers K through 8, actually pre-K through 8 I should say, we'll get some more professional development, and then there's coaching lined up for them as well this school year. And then various others like our math people will go to 2 more days of professional development, along with having a coach from CPM this year. So a lot of professional development, one of the things we wanted to offer with any new curriculum that was coming in for our teachers. Any questions for myself?
One question I have is, do we give any PD to paras, with the new math curriculum? Maybe not so much Amplify, but, the way that math is with the pilot in some of the classes, do they get that, or?
We didn't send any pairs to, any PD. They'll get some from their special ed teacher. We did send one of our special ed teachers,
Okay.
to go, so they'll get some time with her to work with that and see how it goes in the classroom. We don't have, off the top of my head, we don't have very many pairs in the math classroom.
No, a lot of our para support is science and social studies, not a whole lot in math. We do have one last year. We haven't done the schedule yet, but that's something we can look at.
There's a lot of math pull-out. Most students are supported
I
there.
would say if our paras get training on the math, it would be more in interventions and, versus the core curriculum, when they're pulling out in small group.
But it is a good idea, because we will have more push in this year, with pairs than we have in the past, the way the schedule's set up at the elementary anyway. They, we potentially could invite them to some of the number corner stuff training, that we're having at the end of workshop week. There's a possibility that we could look.
You just have to figure out who's
Where, which, that schedule might not be done by then yet.
Does anybody have any questions for Jonathan? All right, thank you, Jonathan. Next up are board committees. Does anybody want to talk about any of their board committees? I can talk a little bit about the Pine County Leadership Meeting. A few notes that I took were, one of the big ones I thought was Pine Tech. There's a new, I would call it, well, I guess they call it the Pine County College Initiative and North Star Promise program. So it's a scholarship-based program for the next 2 years. Goes off of your adjusted gross income. So if you fall under that, it starts the fall of 2024. And I believe, he said it was any state, Minnesota State College, not just Pine Tech. They are also adding a 26,000 square foot addition to Pine Tech. They received a bond for $23 million. They also purchased the old healthcare facility by the River Lake, one of them. The lakeside. And they are turning it into student housing. So they are hoping that they can house 30 students by this fall. Health and Human Services, she spoke, they're bringing some family resources. The community center had one already, right? But we are advertising for them, so that's nice to hear. They, I think are Wednesdays, and then the Pine City Library was a Tuesday, and they go to Sandstone for Thursdays. They were also doing immunizations, so I leave that one out too on Facebook and remind for our community. And then they offer parent resources at these meetings, or what would you call them?
With Becky Foss, what does she call that program? Family Resource Center?
Yes,
Sorry,
that
I
Kayla
can't-
Roberts,
Yeah.
was- yep,
Yeah,
Family Resource Center.
that is what I took for notes. So if there's nobody else, we're gonna move on. All right, any communication, Brian?
No communications.
All right, up next is the budget calendar.
And for August, like we've kind of talked about, we're really watching enrollments, the coming ins and going outs. We don't have a lot of going outs right now, which is good, which meaning our enrollment is growing. We're really watching, like last year, Finlayson numbers, which are better than last year at this point, and then our VPK especially, but and then we'll get Empower as we get further into August. with school getting closer. So that's a big thing that we're watching, because that will then dictate a lot of reports that will come into the fall, especially with that October 1 number coming right around the corner. We talked about that at least on the admin side, and then in the district office, we're going to begin to start learning about the levy process for this year, so we can begin to update the school board in the months ahead as we head into December. With back to school forms, things like that, we still need to have parents and families do free and reduced applications, so we are working on that. As those applications, yes, help absolutely with food service. We know breakfast and lunch is free this year, but it has ties to other funding, so we still need families to fill that out. It ranges from food, athletics, some other categorical aid that we get through the levy process. So we're still going to put a push out for those applications to come in. And then, Ehlers at this point of year gives us some statements on our bonds, things like this. They are not recommending us do anything with our outsourced bonds right now. There's not a benefit to call those back or refinance, anything like that, that we are looking good, and they're not recommending any changes to the bonds that we have out at this time. School board actions, we would look for approval on a memorandum of understanding. We've had this in the past between HFEA and the school board to give a hiring bonus for any hiring of fully licensed special ed teachers. And that bonus is, you can see in that MOU, $2,000. HFE has agreed, so I'm looking for board approval on that MOU.
Is there any language change to the MOU?
No other language change other than dates.
Does anybody have any questions? If there are no questions, I'm looking for a motion to approve the MOU.
I'll make that motion.
I'll second
There's a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes.
Joy, can I just ask a question before reduced?
Mhm.
Can we call it something else, since it's no longer tied to lunch? Like, does it have to be?
I think it does, but I can check.
It can be part of the new
It's a good
paperwork that
question.
people are given?
Yeah.
Does it have to be tied to, does that wording need to be there?
We will check. We may have to, but I'll have our food service check on that tomorrow.
Thank you.
All right. Next up is hockey co-op sports fees.
Last month we talked about this, and what the board had asked was to compare, what had been done in the past is hockey fees had been compared to football fees. So new information I had pulled was what it costs per player for football. It sounds like the board has set hockey fees similar to the cost per player for football. So as we ran that, the average cost per player for football is $1,182. So based on board feedback from there, that is where I set the recommendation that I have for the school board to put that at $1,200. And I also would recommend waiving the Hinckley-Finlayson $50 athletic fee. We as a district don't benefit from that $50 fee. We're not transporting, we're not paying for officials, we're not buying equipment. I don't see, no matter what the board sets the fee at, or the district contribution at, I don't see a reason to charge the $50 Hinckley-Finlayson athletic fee. Pine City is the school district that's buying all these things or paying all these fees. We heard from some parents, and I got an email from the parents as well, also asking for the board to consider raising it to the $1,505 we talked about last month. That's about the average cost for our winter sports. The reason that the winter sports are higher is because we go to more games. Football only has 8 games or so. The basketball, the hockeys that they play, the 25 to 26 games. So that's why the cost per player at least for Hinckley-Finlayson in basketball, was higher at the $1,505. An update, Pine City did change what they billed the families this year. So I believe there was about a $350, if I remember correctly, refund that each family got. Pine City, if you remember some of the billing that we shared in the last few weeks, Pine City had billed the families the jersey costs all in one season. They just divided that over 6 seasons instead of charging it all in one season. So I did update that in here where that average cost, or the cost that the families had to pay for 22-23 was $1,186, which is lower than what I reported last month. But other questions? The biggest question is, do we want to talk about, do we want to compare it to our football cost, which is about $1,182, or our other winter sport costs, which is the $1,505. Either way, I would recommend not making families pay the $50 Hinckley-Finlayson sports fee.
My only thought was, oh, sorry.
No, go ahead, Julie.
My only thought was, I thought Leo said at the last board meeting that it went off of the highest sport. The most
That was my understanding, and
thought it
I
was
always thought it was football. That's why I'm surprised in winter sports are.
Yeah, and then the way Joanne ran it for me, she compared the same thing for football and basketball coaches, our workers, officials, outside workers, supplies, uniforms, if we had them, our huddle camera, our training support, our athletic director support for that sport, and Associate High School League fees, and transportation. Football did have the added cost of lighting at Burquist Field.
There's also a lot more basketball games than there used to be too, right?
Correct, there's 27 or 6, and football plays 8 half at home. And
But
so they're
even
not,
in previous years, like 10 years ago. there's
yeah,
more
basketball used to be
games than there used
in the
to be.
high
Yes.
teens, low to 20,
Yep.
and that has changed
So it
dramatically.
maybe was,
It's cost more than
Yeah.
the time.
Yeah.
And transportation's gotten very expensive, as you'll see later in our transportation report. Transportation costs are going up.
How much did the cost to participate in sports go up, just for one sport, let's say, year over year? Did it go up at all?
The fee that we charge families,
Yeah, for a student to participate in, say, basketball.
we had been at $45 for probably the I can't remember how many years, for at least the last 3 or 4. We just upped it last month to 50. I believe shortly 4 or 5 years ago it was at 40. So we probably change it every 4 or 5 years. We just changed it to 50 last month.
And then the per student cost then is like $1,500 for basketball?
We don't, the basketball players only pay the $50 fee.
Mm-hmm.
The hockey families have paid, the district has contributed before this year $1,000, and then they pay any cost over that $1,000.
Right. So the school's basically incurring costs primarily with diesel fuel to get the kids to their games, and it comes out to about $1,500.
It's paying for coaches' salaries, their benefits that they get with that. It's paying for officials, for people who work the clocks, things like that. It's paying for any supplies that go into the program. Athletic director costs, we divide the athletic director salary divided by each season.
Mm-hmm.
It's also covering our trainer, same thing. We have a fee for the trainer. We divide it for each sport she covers. And then Minnesota State High School League fee. Transportation is the biggest expense other than coaches' salaries.
Okay. I never thought basketball would be so high per player.
Yeah.
So what is your recommendation of 1,200? That's a 200.
That's what I recommended, and that was based on the feedback from the board meeting, just that we've compared it to football in the past. I certainly hear the parents' point of it hasn't changed ever since I've been here. It sounds like 17 years, so it's been quite a while since the district has changed the hockey contribution.
I think 1,200 is, fair, and then maybe look at it again next year again, but.
So does the school district just cut a check then for $1,200 for each co-op player?
The district in the past has given $1,000 to Pine City for each co-op player, and then Pine City bills us, which we then bill the parents.
Okay, so the parents pay over the amount, right?
Correct.
If it's above that amount?
If it's about any dollar above 1,000, the parents are responsible for. Last year, the parents were responsible for $1,186.
and what is the total this year? Do they know yet?
I don't know if we've seen an updated, I'm guessing it'll be similar. I don't know what ice fees are. I haven't seen new costs for that for this year, but I know the jersey cost is divided,
Right.
that hasn't been totally eliminated because they divided over 6 seasons. I don't know if Stacy, you've heard more about fees for this upcoming year. I haven't seen,
Past season, we're charged with 1,600, up to, almost 1,600, so just change that. Ice fees wise, that changes every year. I don't know if we have that, do we have?
Yep, I have the invoices from this past from 2022 to 2023, and then the one for the previous year from 2021 to 2022. The invoices that the parents have received. And those were in these packets, which I thought, because that was attached to.
for the last
the
year's
email.
ice fees. I'm
Correct.
wondering, have they set fees for the upcoming school year yet?
We won't see that until you charge us next year.
Right.
Yeah.
They don't charge that until they actually use the facilities.
Gotcha.
I would support paying the $15.05 because we pay that for our basketball players. I feel like student athletes should get the same benefit, so I would be okay with paying the $15.05, in my opinion.
How many hockey players do we have? Do we know going in this?
This current.
From Hinckley, three.
So you said you were billed 1,600, but it has 1,186 on here.
1,600s for the upcoming year is what you're gonna be billed?
No.
Was that before the reimbursement, maybe?
Yes, it must be, because
Do you guys want your folders? It has the invoices in there with all the detailed information.
We have, but when you had the refund.
The refund was
Wasn't
about
in there.
300.
We haven't received that refund yet.
Correct.
We haven't heard of that, the number.
I believe it's $356 if I'm remembering correctly.
for the uniform.
How much they're gonna get in a refund. Each family, what
414.
what we reported last month is
$1,342.40. That's what this bill is.
$1,542.40.
Mhm.
Yep, and they're now you're getting, each family's gonna get back $356.40. So that reflects the new number that's in the board agenda. It hasn't been issued yet, but that's what Pine City told us that we should reimburse.
So Brian, if more kids go out for sports then we can just divide it by a lower number then, larger numbers, so the numbers per.
It's per, yeah, it would go down if they had more kids.
Right.
So am I understanding this right, if we give them, or pay 1,200 of it, and their cost was the 1,542 minus, they're actually gonna make $14, is that right?
No, so
1,200?
the way that list is, so the district pays right now $1,000 for each player.
Right,
That list is then what the parents pay on top of that $1,000. So that 1,186 is on top of the district contribution of $1,000.
so what they're getting billed for has $1,000 off already?
Correct.
Okay,
But the 23-24 cost is,
Have you
The
seen?
current cost is the $1,342.40. So when I had bumped it up, it is that I was including the booster fee that we also have to pay on top of that. So you guys, the school doesn't pay for our booster fee, that comes out of our own expense. So that fluctuates every year depending on how many students, how many new players are coming in, on like how many new jackets they have to pay for, that kind of thing, so. Last year, I think we paid $250, you paid $275, and I had to pay $250. But my child was a returning player.
Yeah, the boosters aren't even, it isn't even figured into the invoice itself. The invoice that I have in front of me that I paid is for all of the fees. So the invoice that I had was for $25,42.40. The school picked up $1,000 of that. I wrote a check for $15,42.40.
Yep.
That's what we had to pay.
And Hinckley's gonna issue them a refund of that 356.
I guess I agree with Heather, if we're looking at the highest sport, and I thought that's what Neil said last month, 15, 15:05.
So, can I ask a question? I don't know that we'll have that answer tonight, but is there a way to find out what baseball is? Is baseball's fee just as high, or is it different than the basketball of the?
I haven't run our other sports, our spring sports.
I sent an email to Mandy asking her what was the highest per player contribution first, and I did hear back from her yet. I just sent that to her this morning. And I also asked her just to see what Pine City and Mora, other competing districts, what they actually pay per player for, like apples to apples, what they pay for hockey for their district fees.
I would say football's your highest because of the helmet reconditioning and.
But it's not
It's not
because they have
for
all
us, it's basketball right now.
But, I mean, it could be on a cycle of, because your helmets are on every 3 years.
Equipment is
Yeah.
more expensive, obviously.
And wasn't that just in the bills, the helmet?
Yeah, but we don't do them all at once, so we try to break it, they're on a
They're on a
rotation.
cycle, yeah.
Okay.
And we got, we just got a bunch of helmets in the last few years, so it just might not have caught up to us yet on that, the reconditioning yet. I can certainly, if the board would like, I can pull our spring sports to see if they cost, if basketball is our highest. If the board would like, I could certainly run that. We don't have to make a decision in August, we could still make it in September. I'd just like to obviously make it before hockey season, so the district can know and the families can know.
Yeah, I guess I kinda like that, plus two, since they don't know exactly how much this next year's fees are gonna be, then at least now we have solid numbers.
If not all of the sports were ran, it should be ran off of all of the sports.
Okay.
To see what is the
To
highest.
see what's the highest.
Maybe do more in 1 year too.
I think it should, well, right, because it should be an average of,
Right.
especially if there was no football, well, we know there's football equipment purchased, but if there's a larger,
Cause if you only got the jerseys, that's like.
and they got
every
new
3
helmets
years.
with like the last 3 years, didn't they get like so many
Mhm.
helmets the last 3 years?
Correct.
But so maybe that will average out, I don't know, I'm just saying, but I think instead of trying to do it off of just winter and somehow we get football in here, it should be off of everything. So we're gonna table this till next month?
Yeah.
Vicky has a question.
Oh, Vicky.
Can I just, at the end, if you guys would like, I have them in an envelope so you guys can see the
Yes.
fees from last year and the fees from this year. They're the actual invoices that were sent to us, or, well, Stacy has the one from last year, but they're the actual invoices that we received for the hockey fees. So you can see the breakdown of what everything is, well,
Okay.
sort of, because we've questioned what some of the just the lump sums are, because we'd like to know what we're paying as well.
Sure.
So,
Yes.
but it's more detailed information within these packets.
Okay, do I have to make a motion to table that till?
Yeah, since it's an action item.
Okay, so then, I'm looking for a motion to table the hockey fees for September board meeting.
I'll make the motion.
I'll second.
Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 7-0. Next up is the mileage rate for, the change in mileage
Yep.
rate for IRS.
Last month, we had the number typed wrong, so just doing a correction, our mileage rate for the IRS reimbursement is 65.5 cents per mile. Last month I had in 62.5, so this is just correcting that to the 65.5 cents per mile reimbursement rate.
Does anybody have any questions? If not, I'm looking for a motion to accept the mileage rate of 65.5.
Did that rate go up year over year?
It does go up almost every year.
How much did it go up?
Last year was 62.5, so I had
Okay.
typed in last year's number when I typed it last month.
Thank you.
I'll move that.
I'll second
Is there there's a motion and a second, any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 7-0. Next up is Jake Pride. Does anybody have any additions to Jake Pride? Jake War Pride? Not, we'll move on to the Indian education policy.
Recommend we renew this every year, recommending renewal again. Again, the only change I made was changing one of the names in there from our elementary counselor to our American Indian Education Coordinator. This policy helps us with communication from the school to our Indian Education Parent Committee and with the state funding. So recommending this policy to be reapproved with just the change of titles in the policy.
Does anybody have any questions? Then I am looking for a motion to approve the Indian education policy.
I'll second.
There's a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 7-0. Next up is the bus driver syllabus.
Had Sarah work on our bus driver syllabus. She only had 2 changes from last year. That's under number 2 when our emergency evacuation drills will be. And then under fuel purchase, just adding in slim service as that was not in last year's syllabus. So otherwise there are no changes to the policy.
Does anybody have any questions?
I have a question. Just on the emergency evacuation, it says needs to be practiced in the fall and spring, and she just says done in September.
We'll have her add spring dates.
So will that come back to us for approval then, for the dates?
Unless the board's okay with me approving it once I add those dates in. Just because we'd like to get the syllabus out to the bus drivers before school starts. Would the board be comfortable with that, with adding in?
Yeah, can it come back as a discussion item?
Yep.
Then we'll bring it back as a discussion, but then it can. So then I'm looking for a motion to accept the bus driver syllabus that's been presented.
Could we just make a minor tweak to that emergency evacuation, say with a date to be added in the spring additionally, just something like that?
You want me to write that in the policy?
Yeah, just something just so there's clarification that we will have also a spring training or evacuation drill.
Yep. I got it.
Thank you.
So I'm looking for a motion to accept the bus driver syllabus as presented
I'll make the motion.
with the changes.
I'll second it.
We have Heather and Toby. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 7-0. Next up is our school meal policy.
This is updated to reflect that every student's getting a free lunch and free breakfast. It's also updated to reflect that staff will be required to maintain a positive balance in their accounts. Otherwise, this policy is unchanged from when we approved it last spring. But this is just updating to make sure every student gets their free breakfast and lunch.
Does anybody have any questions? I'm looking for a motion to approve the school meal policy.
I'll make the motion. I'll second.
There's a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 7-0. Next up is the internet use and safety policy.
This is also updated after legislation. The biggest update was surrounding cell phones, and both principals talked about their cell phone policies, so you've already approved that part. But the part that the law does allow is that the school district has reasonable suspicion that a student has violated a school policy, rule, or law by use of cell phone. The school district can search that device, and also students who use electronic communication during the school day and are a violation of the school district's policies could then get discipline action following our handbook, and the devices could be confiscated. So we've had that in practice. It just puts that into policy now that the school board has. So that is coming out of the last legislation regarding cell phones.
Does anybody have any questions? If not, I'm looking for a motion to approve the internet use and safety policy.
I'll make a motion.
I'll second.
There's a motion and a second, any discussion? If not, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 7-0. Next up are 6 policies.
Yeah, sorry, the state came through with a lot of policy changes. These are the second read of what we read last month. Most of these you've approved now in the student handbooks, and most of these changes are because of law that came out of the last legislation. So I'd recommend approval of all 6.
Does anybody have any questions? So if not, I'm looking for a motion to approve the 6 policies of policy number 102, equal educational opportunity, number 418, drug-free workplace, drug-free school, policy number 419, tobacco-free environment, policy number 506, student discipline, policy 509, enrollment of non-resident students, policy 514, bully prohibition policy.
I'll second.
If there's a motion and a second, any other discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 7-0. Next up are our first reads.
Again, we'll have another 5 coming. Again, this is because the legislation had a lot of changes and we're trying to update some of these as quickly as we can before school without then overwhelming the school board completely with policy. So these are just the next 5 that we'll work on as we head into next month.
Does anybody have any questions right now regarding the 5 for Brian? All right, then we are going to move on to the election resolution.
Looking for approval of this resolution. We have to have board approval of this resolution prior to August 25th. When I reached out to Pine County just for some advice, knowing we didn't have another school board meeting until after August 25th, yet we may not have all the names. They said it was okay for the school board to approve the resolution as it's presented now. And if we have more candidates who file before 5 p.m. tomorrow night, I can add that. And then we are still waiting on some callbacks on some of our election judges. Pine County said it would be okay if the school board does approve that tonight rather than try to call a special meeting between now and August 25th. Then we would have Dave come sign that once all the names are on this before we issue it to the county. We have to issue it, like I said, to the county by August 25th. So it just gives our candidates, potential candidates, that are one more day to file, and then we're waiting on some callbacks from election judges. But I am looking for approval on this once we get all those names put into this document. As of now, we have 5 candidates running for the 3 seats.
Does anybody have any questions regarding the election resolution? If not, then I'm looking for a motion to accept it.
I'll make a motion.
I'll second.
There's a motion and a second, any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 7-0. Next up is the transportation report.
Looking for approval on this. This is annually something the board approves either in August or September. Something that we report to MDE. And if you open that document, you can see it's just stating what our miles on our buses were last year for total miles, field trips, extracurricular miles, costs, and you can see how we've broken that down with costs for repairs, tires, insurance, things like that. The driver supervisor cost also includes some administrative cost in the district office. And then the final numbers, you can see how many buses we have in our fleet and then how many routes we ran last year. So I'm looking for approval on that report if there are not any questions.
Does anybody have any questions? Not, I'm looking for a motion to approve the transportation report.
I'll make the motion.
I'll second.
There's a motion and a second, any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 7-0. Next up is recommendation to close the school board meeting according to Minnesota statute 13D.01 to discuss employee evaluation, the superintendent annual review, as well as to discuss the district's employee negotiation strategy. I am now looking for a motion to move into closed session.
I'll make the motion.
A second.
There's a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.